The agenda for today is intro. The idea is to present what we've been doing as part of the work we have done in the thematic group of My Data for Pandemics. Then we would have a discussion in breakout. We were very, very positive, thinking that we were going to have a lot of people, but I think we can limit ourselves in just one group. And then the idea would be to have some reporting and conclusion. But if we have one group, maybe we could have a shorter session, and I think it may be good potentially for everybody. It has been quite an interesting day today. But so let's go to the intro. Do we want to, because I see that maybe when we go to the discussion, we may want to introduce ourselves before we go, because there's a few new person there, and I think it would be good to introduce each other. Iain, sorry, I'm first going to very quickly describe some of the things that we have envisioned and see in the My Data for Pandemics work in terms of the user perspective and what the user want based on the study that was done there. And then Iain will explain what it is that it is important from a technology perspective. And then we'll go into the problem. So what we did in the My Data for Pandemic is to try to understand what the people want. And at the very beginning, we thought, oh, maybe that's just what they want to have, is to have more freedom of movement. But the study we did across people across different countries, I think it was Canada, it was UK and Italy, and I think there's another one country. But anyway, the what came out clear and loud was that the people wanted to have access to trustworthy information and understand what measure are of application and how and why they apply to them. So the need for information based on data that are adapted to the people is very important. And then based on that, well, a second part was that for citizens, it's important to maximum freedom of movement, but it is important to minimize the risk of contagion for others and personal risk to become infected. The last element, which was the less important, is the fact that as an individual, people are ready to share data to an organization they can trust if it is done in a secure way, and if the organization can ensure data privacy and give control whenever needed. And I must say, throughout the conference, there has been kind of a consistent message that we've had, that people are ready to share their data if they can trust and feel secure. But so what does that mean concretely? And there's one thing I would like to go a little bit more, because that's where the data are the most important. It is in the maximizing freedom of movement. What does that really mean? The idea, and you may have heard about that mobility pass, is that is now being proposed, or common pass or travel pass. And currently it's very much based on a test, or the fact that people have been, no, more and more, they will be about people have been vaccinated or not. There may be some question about that, about is that ethical? Isn't that a stigmatization to force the people to be vaccinated or to be tested before they can travel? And one of the key components that we have actually developed into the My Data for Pandemics is to actually go with something a little bit more sophisticated, based on groups, and based on where you are, based on different type of data, then you would fit in different group. And your QR code would actually be linked to that. So there would be, you could be a stay-at-home person, or move only in if critical, or full freedom to actually go everywhere. And that's based on data, of personal data, but not just personal data, but also population data and where you actually want to go. So your population information at the country level could be red, orange, or green, but the more specific area where you want to go can be itself red, orange, or green. It's not a one size fits it all. So that's population information. And then you have also individual information like the contagion risk and the health risk. And so based on those different elements, we can derive group. By the way, this matrix is completely fake. It's given as an example. And to actually make sure we can exploit the data properly, obviously, we need to have the rules here validated by authority. But instead of having the, yes, you can actually go to one place and work because you're a critical worker, or no, everybody else needs to stay home, you can see here that you can have something much, much more refined, which does not necessarily requires a vaccine or a testing. And so, for example, the country is in a red stage, but you want to go into a green area and there is no contagion risk because that's proof based on your data, then you should have a full freedom to move. But if you want to go in a red area, then you'd actually need to have well, some limitation. You would need to move only if it's needed. And to actually go to that level of refinement, which is not just black and white, you are tested positive or negative, or black and white, you're vaccinated or not. We need to actually bring a lot of data together, and we need to do the segmentation. And the quality of data is extremely important here. And so how do we do this practically in terms of the system? How do we bring all those data together? Iain?
Yeah, sure. So as Isabelle says, I mean, the underlying problem that we've had all the way through the pandemic is lack of ability to segment the audience or the citizen base globally and then within country into anything other than black and white. So basically you have 0.1% of the population is in the ill segment, varying between a little bit ill or even asymptomatic and seriously ill or have passed away. But 99.9% of the population is in this other big blob segment, which is lockdown of various degrees of lockdown. So that's where we were in terms of how we see this changing. And realistically, it's not going to change too much for COVID-19. It may well change for subsequent pandemics or subsequent similar type things. Is you need to enable the individual to essentially carry on, let's call it a digital twin. So the individual has a representation of themselves, so a data store and an identity that they can essentially bubble up data about themselves, their COVID status, their intentions to travel from A to B, and the overall data set that enables the things to be done is much, much richer because it's contributed to by the 99.9% rather than just the 0.1%. So essentially, we're talking about tooling people up with their own personal data capabilities, which, and the key on the right is a personal data store, a digital wallet, an intelligent assistant that essentially makes the whole thing able to be engaged with, and a dashboard where the individual can switch things on and off. So that's and the individual is that point of integration where they're pulling in data from different places. Might be a lab test, right, or an employment or a transport operator. The individual is in the middle of that ecosystem, pushing and pulling data where they need to. Does that make sense? Yeah, and obviously that becomes more sophisticated over time. So the individual is on the left-hand side. Over time, you can bring in wearables, you can bring in apps for contact tracing that will gradually help the individual. But the other main thing that we worked on during the kind of April, May, June period was the concept of my data commons. So essentially the aggregated data set that the individual controls, what goes into it and what can be done with it. To drive much, much richer analytics than we currently have at the moment. So that's the kind of big picture.
Yeah, but I think there's something quite important here is that it is quite important to have those population comments, because if you don't have that in context population, the only thing you can do is kind of a black and white, as you can see here. If you want to do more in terms of, well, something which is less stigmatization, then you need more data. And by the way, the thing which is interesting as well here is that if you have those additional information like self-assessment and wearable, you can also, and contact tracing is potentially as important for that case, but you can also do post-marketing surveillance in terms of the vaccine when given, which is certainly important because it's not yet completely clear what is the effect on vaccine, for example, on elderly or on small children. And it's quite important to actually be able to further check on that. But so the fact that it is population data common is quite important to actually bring all that together.
And the key point, Isabelle, is that we're saying the only way you're going to get that type of data set is to put the individual in charge of it.
Absolutely.
And give them the tools to make that a reasonably easy, understandable journey. Because if you think about what we've been told for the last 10 years is the power of big data, right? And that surveillance capitalism can know almost everything about us. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's utterly failed during this pandemic, and it didn't fail for technology reasons. Right? An awful lot more things could have been known if you'd taken that kind of privacy concern out. But the reality is the privacy concern and the regulatory concern is what has stopped that whole engine being switched on.
And I think the fact that we don't have yet individual at the center of integration, and we don't have yet the infrastructure in place to actually be able to do that. I don't think we have enough of that yet. And we were discussing at the session before just about data trust and earning trust. And fundamentally, people still have in their mind it's be problem-centric or being country-centric, but not being individual-centric. But I think we have that more in the discussion later. Shall we go, Iain, on discussing the kind of the quickly and so maybe listen to other people in there.
Yeah, yes. It'd be good to get other people's take on it.
Shall we go quickly through by different people here into the different findings? Maybe Iain, you want to actually go with the first one. So what are the problems that we found?
Yeah, and I'll take that first one. So essentially, I mean, all of my career has been in customer management. So managing large scale customer or citizen bases, right? And it's very much a known quantity. Right? If you need to manage your customer or citizen base, you need as big a data set as you can get or model, and then you segment that base into its different clusters and you drive action from that segmentation. And what you'll always find it becomes an optimization challenge, right? You can't deliver everything to every segment, right? So it's an artificial intelligence optimization if we want to go down that kind of road. But we didn't have that possibility, as we said, in the pandemic. It was very much two segments. One is tiny and highly active with tons and tons of data about it, and the other one is gigantic and sitting at home doing not very much. So essentially, we propose to move beyond that by bringing more data to the party from the bulk of the population that's not yet delivering anything.
And kind of as an extension of that is that, again, as we were, I was saying before, is that today we are problem-centric. People are looking at the problem of pandemics. And so what do is take data from the medical record, from self-assessment, from different data sources, and we put that at the population level. And then those are population database that exist. And those ones are then brought into a data commons, which is itself also anonymized, and then used for reporting. No value for the individual, and also no possibility to see that the information at on location information is the same information from the same individual that the self-assessment or the one from medical record. There's absolutely no way to actually bring that together. And so that may give some bias, and there's been some articles showing that we were comparing population of 1 million around employment and about 100,000 for location and bringing them together. So it was not very much good type of analysis, a lot of bias. What we actually propose here is to say, well, bring all those data together first at the individual level with his approval within that My Data operator you've seen before, and also within a My Data operator allow the individual to give permission to share his or own data, anonymize or identify based on the need at the population level. And then from that, you can still extract population reporting for mobility, for authority, with higher quality, by the way, but you can then also provide feedback for the individual in terms of scoring, which is not just black and white, but on testing or vaccination, but it is a score which is also based on population information. And so no, by bringing the individual at the center, you can also bring value back to the individual while increasing the quality for the other people. Adrian.
So the second perspective would be how to balance human rights and data access or data uses. On the problem side, we have a couple of things that are not achieved yet and not necessarily easy to achieve. Ensuring that a personal data sharing platform is in place. Do we treat it as a human right, for example, or is this a private sector activity? That is certainly not been settled. Another problem, and you saw it in the previous slide, people sort of assume that anonymizing data is a good thing because it does promote consent. But the fact is that it also damages the ability to aggregate data, to create longitudinal summaries, and to cross over the 4 silos that we saw on the previous slide. So anonymization, I would say, is a last resort. It is not necessarily the preferred outcome. The third problem, and very, very difficult, is what Shoshana Zuboff, the person who coined the term surveillance capitalism, asks the question, who decides and who decides to decides? This obviously, people are reluctant to have government do this, and even to have nonprofits make these decisions. And finally, in order to promote proper, societal behavior, there has to be transparency as to how the data is being used. And we don't really have that in a way that's human meaningful or human centered. On the solution side, we know certain things will definitely serve. Decentralization, which allows choice, for example, and also diversity of solutions. Separation of concerns, so that the entities that are making the requirements, whether they're government or standards organizations, are not the ones that are also holding the data or controlling the data. And neither of those two should be responsible for auditing whether things are working or not. And on the technology side, we need the global standards in order to enable decentralization and separation of concerns. We need open source in order to guarantee transparency and also a continuous learning system. And we need to start thinking not in terms of anonymization, but in terms of differential privacy at various points in the commons. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I wanted to push on the wrong. Yes.
Yeah, I've been working on data for the past almost less than 20 years, anyway, since it became important to analyze data. And in these years, I noticed that basically the data literacy or the lack of data literacy is becoming more and more important. And in a situation like pandemic, where it's even worse because not having a proper understanding of the data are analyzed, this can create a sort of worry of the unknown, this new virus or whatever is coming, and on top what is perceived, on top of the big data is perceived as a concept that people a fear of, because they lack of understanding what is the big data. And so the reaction is on the people's minds and on the organization itself that are made by people is sort of being overwhelmed by this data concept. And then if you have this kind of feeling, we tend to avoid to understand the data itself, and then understand that data is just a pure information, but we don't have a way to communicate this in the proper way. And of course, when we don't know how to communicate, we don't know something, our confidence to argue something that is being presented to us by media, by AI, by machine learning, whatever, is very low. And then at this point, we are not able to challenge the system or to use our rights in the right way in order to protect ourselves. Of course, as I mentioned, because organizations are made by people, these have the same effect, but is more augmented, amplified, this situation, because you're going to have decision makers that take, let's say, so-called informed decision that actually are not well informed for example, lack of confidence in, okay, what type of asking the basic question when it's coming to data, what type of data my business needs, and then the attitude is to collect everything, or mislead by experts because they gave the power to those experts by the fact they don't know, they can't understand the data itself. So these problems are being here around for the past 5 years even, and then just increasing. The solution is, one side is to change the education system, okay, to have new foundations that not only, let's say, at the university level, but even earlier, primary school or college or something like that, that people start to think about data as something that they can deal easily every day, but then need to be, say, aside, feed or updated with personal growth initiative, because the ecosystem is complex. At the end, if we need to be data citizen, because in this way we know how to understand the data, deal with the data, interact with organization systems that are managing the data, are collecting the data, and there will be the same level of common page. We have a common background to understand each other, and as a data citizen, I know what type of data the system needs. I can provide a more qualitative data, and so it's a sort of circle that goes around and out of it itself.
Thank you. Seth.
Thank you. So if we touch upon the problem of fair data, to borrow the concept from research, which talks about findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of data. So we're actually dealing with non-fair data here, with the problem being that it's very fragmented and hard to get to. I mean, even get authorized to get to, because this is containing health records, employment records, and also in many different formats. So the architecture we're proposing, so that that we build from the individual up to data trusts and maybe even higher level structures or data access, is that this data would be more easily found if you know that it resides in a specialized trust, for example, a COVID-19 trust, which handles only COVID-19 data. In this trust, you would also have, you could gain access if you are applicable, right? And probably the data would be curated already at the stage where it gets to into the personal data storage, therefore would be more usable for different purposes. As far as interoperability is concerned, so we know that we definitely need open standards, and probably decentralized IDs could facilitate the actual finding of data. So that would be a quick recap of this problem. Thank you.
Next one. So well, I think that was the last one we kind of want to conclude, is that it is so important that, well, today it's nice to speak about data and data sharing and good quality data, but we don't have the right infrastructure from a legal and technology perspective at the personal data. And so the trust in existing institutions to actually contain our data is very, very limited. So what is and as mentioned by Seth, the idea would actually to bring in place a citizen data trust that would co-manage those personal data, certainly in the context of the COVID, where citizens would be empowered because they have the right technology, as you've seen that by Iain at the beginning, those three components, the intelligent assistant, we provide information and support the person, the control panel, to allow for sharing the data and support the consent management. And the third one about the digital wallet is quite important because it's very simple for the citizen. Even behind that, it's relatively powerful, and it really helps the citizen to actually co-manage the data. But for that, the citizen data trust needs to not just have technology, but also well-defined terms and conditions to make sure that the individual actually can start, well, and feel comfortable that the data is sharing, for example, contact information. When he's sharing that or she's sharing that, it's shared in the right way to the right person for the right purpose. And so without infrastructure, there's no way, and terms and conditions and governance, there's no way that we can actually provide the right solution here, because we can't be individual centric. And so that's one of the key components that we would need to put in place and push forward if we want to move forward. So with that, I would suggest that we were going to go in different records, but obviously we don't have a huge amount of people. And I would suggest that then maybe we introduce ourselves. If I did not do that at the beginning on purpose because I see a few more people have joined, and that's good. So maybe I'll suggest I'll take the people that we have in the Zoom, and then we go one by one. So maybe I'll introduce myself first. So Isabelle de Zegher, I'm a physician and a computer scientist. I've been working for 30 years, that's a long time, at the interface between business in healthcare and pharma and IT. And I've been working mostly in pharma IT. But since a year and a half ago, I decided that personal data sharing was far more important for me for the rest of my career. And so that's where I started to work on that. And since of June, I'm co-leading with a lot of people here, more specifically in my data, the My Data for Pandemics thematic group, where we kind of struggle because there was a lot of different aspects that we need to tackle. But the data aspect is only one. I think there's also other aspects related to business model and how do we make it happen. So very much enjoy the work we have done. I don't think we're yet at the end. But so would be also very useful to understand what the other people not in the team do mean. So very much welcome the other participants. Davide.
Davide, I'm telecom engineer as a background, but then I start to work on data back in 2008 because for customer behavior, user experience. And then from there, I start to really work more on data, any type of data, basically. And because I'm interested in find out from the the data, what we can do, what's possible to do, help the society or people that need to use the data in the proper way, basically. And then I joined 2018 my data because my interest on personal data, how I've been abused, was getting strong feeling. So, and then I joined my data, and in this case I worked with Isabelle and Iain, search to create a solution, in this case focus on COVID, in order to have interoperability and use the data in the right way that can help pharma or government to understand what's going on.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you. So my name is Ahlin. I'm currently involved. So I'm the co-organizer of My Data Slovenia. I'm involved in the data fund projects and Swarm decentralized storage projects, and I joined this COVID group to tackle the perspective of decentralization and was researching data trusts and so on in this regard, how it could be done. So the interest is, of course, because of the current situation, and also I studied statistics and also did, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I also did analysis of wearable data in that in that time, and that would be maybe a quick introduction from my side.
Thank you, Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrian Gropper. I'm a physician and engineer, and the particular relatively unique specialty that I have is on the regulatory side, having both experience in the regulation of physician practice as, in the fiduciary sense, or the Hippocratic Oath sense, as well as my various businesses as a medical device regulation issues. And my current role for about 10 years now is as a patient advocate and physician advocate basically in a lot of standards work and technical projects, open source, non-commercial, all the way through.
Thank you, Iain.
Yeah, Iain Henderson. As I mentioned earlier, I've been working in customer management for a long time. All sorts of countries, all sorts of different sectors. The current day job is with the Data Lab, which essentially is the Scottish Government's innovation hub for data and artificial intelligence. Through all of my exposure to managing personal data, all that time I've become a big privacy geek and a big personal data empowerment geek. So I've been in My Data from the start, essentially, and Project VRM beforehand. So anything that's building data on the side of the individual, tend to have been involved in.
Thank you, Frederick.
So I'm Frederick. I'm co-founder of the Swedish Hub, and my background is in healthcare since 2006, when I ran the national services for healthcare in Sweden, and I had to piss in a bottle for 400,000 identities, all of the healthcare personnel in Sweden. In 2011 or so, I realized that if we're ever going to make this happen, it has to be in a My Data-like way, meaning that it's patient-mediated. Otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere. So that's why I'm engaged here.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yes, hi, everyone, I'm Sherry, and I'm currently a co-founder of a startup company in Taiwan called Numbers, and what Numbers do is help to create the confirm the integrity of the image data, and can build a traceable framework of the image and to prevent the fake news and the information. And although I'm the co-founder of the software company, but actually my expertise is bioinformatics analysis. So that's why I joined the thematic group since I forgot, maybe July or August, and very happy to know everyone here. But it's very late in Taiwan, so I may not join the discussion section later. But nice to see you here.
Thank you, Sherry. Vero? There's a person named Vero Estrada Galinanes. Would you introduce yourself? That person is on mute. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry, I was at the end halfway of the talk, but well, I will introduce myself. So I'm a researcher in Norway at the University of Stavanger. I also collaborate with SWAM, and I do research in doing the reliable storage systems. And yeah, I was trying to find out a bit more about what has been done in COVID, but mostly for curiosity.
Okay, thank you. But maybe as we go to the question, if you have more questions, we can certainly go. And then there is a person with J, sorry,
Jan.
with green. Who is that? Can you introduce yourself, please? Person is on mute. Yes.
I didn't present myself. My name is Jan Lindqvist. I'm based in Stockholm, so part of the My Data Sweden now. And I've been working with data science, data engineering for 5 years. And I've seen the challenges with how do you build projects with data, but with the permissions from the individual. So I've been also active in the GDPR area. I advise companies on how to be transparent and how they use the data. And my interest in this area is how to be able to do the research with the consent by the individuals. So that's how do you make them believe and trust that what we're building with the My Data Operator gives them the power to control and say, okay, yes, use my data. So I'm also active in the ESEF hackathon together with the iGrant, who has developed a great credential management solution using verifiable credentials. And we have even a demo surrounding COVID-19 and doing the test, and that's a nice demo. So I'm very interested in the area and how do we evolve to get the massive amount of data, but people feeling not feeling that they're losing their control. Thank you.
Thank you. Sami? Sami Lane. Can you unmute yourself? No, doesn't seem to work. Sami, are you there? Not sure. Nicolo Zingales?
Yes, hi. So my name is Nicolo Zingales. I'm here at the Center for Technology and Society in Rio de Janeiro, and I'm a co-founder of the My Data Brazil Hub. And I've done recently a conference, an event on data governance during the pandemic, a view from Latin America. So I'm trying to bring together the different perspectives from countries here in the region. And we are also launching a special issue on this topic in January. Will be out in January. So, but I would like to understand a little bit more about the My Data approach to this. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, and maybe we can go back to some of the things that Iain presented as well before, if you have question. Sammy Lane, are you there or not? Still on mute. Okay. Julie, do you want quickly to present yourself, even though you are facilitating, but there's no reason you should not present yourself.
Hello to everyone. My name is Julie Green. I'm based in Kampala, Uganda. My background is a mix of telecommunications, teaching, a Master of International Crisis Management, and I'm working on a global volunteer initiative called Project Lockdown, where we're looking at human and digital rights, and we've created a mapping platform, and we're mapping like all the territories around the world. So although I'm just a room assistant, this is also very, very interesting to me too. So thank you, Isabella.
Thank you. So that's a good thing. Okay, great. Thank you, Judy. So maybe we, as the co-lead within My Data for Pandemic, we are certainly interested to actually understand your point of view, and you see the question we have there. But maybe before we go there, just out of courtesy, maybe we can see if you have questions on the work that we have done. I don't know, Nicolo, because you've been working that on Brazil, and also maybe Julie, because you've been something of interest. What is it that that is interested to you, that you would want to understand, and maybe also how we could actually work together and expand of what we've done, what you have done, and so cross-fertilize, because I think it's important.
Yes, what I was suggesting is how can the My Data principles be specified? You know, I must say that I came in only halfway through, so I apologize for that if I missed your presentation. Maybe, you know, if there's a link that I can get more information from, and I will look the video from the event again. But what we are trying to do here is there are many countries that don't have a specific data protection law in place, or they have a very weak framework for data protection. So what we want to try to find is a hook through the My Data principles that we can use to promote responsible businesses here. So how can we specify these principles in a way that, for example, they encourage responsible My Data operators? And I should say we have a session on this also tomorrow that you're all very welcome to join. And that will be focused on the Latin American region.
Okay, maybe I'll present two slides very quickly. So the first thing is that we spent, obviously it has not been very clear from the beginning what could be done. Apart that we realized that it was important to put the individual at the center and to use those data into population data commons. But so one other thing we realized after a few months of discussion and evaluation with people is that they wanted first information about what is important in terms of the measure that our application for them, which was quite unclear, and I think it's still unclear for many of us. They also want to have something which allowed them to have more freedom of movement, to go to an event, to go to a restaurant, to go to some family, to go to another country. And the last thing is that, yes, we are ready to share, but frankly, sharing the data was not the problem. And I think, Iain Lindquist, you asked the question, the feeling, and it was also confirmed by other study that was done by the World Economic Forum, sharing is not a problem if it's easy to do and they can do that in a secure way. And so what is more important for them, for the individual, it's access to information and responsible freedom of movement. And it's intuitive, as a matter of fact. And if you discuss with people just also in the street, that's what gives the impression they want. So, and behind that, you can actually build much more, well, maybe I'll go very quickly into this one, because the idea is that when you bring all those data together, you can actually start to have much more refined quote lockdown measure. Instead of having black and white, you can say, well, based on your status, you have a different lockdown principle, stay home or full freedom of movement. And that is based on segmentation principle that you can do on the population. And obviously those rules here would actually need to be provided by the authorities. And that's where when we started those principles, that's where we start to realize that we could use that in many different use cases. That's the use case of travel today. Let's assume you just have lab information and you put verify credential. That's the only thing you can do, right? No, if you actually bring more data, self-assessment data, wearable data, contact tracing data, and you agree to share with that control panel and potentially there is support, then you can store all those data individually, but also then share that in the population data common. And it's at that moment that you can have something which is much, much more refined and sophisticated in terms of the digital wallet. And if you start to look at this principle, then you can apply that to transport, you can apply that to school, you can apply that to go to the restaurant, to event. And also, we also start to look at surveillance of individual and surveillance from a post-marketing surveillance, which is a used term in pharma, for looking at the safety of the vaccine and look if there is no adverse event coming quite quickly. So it is something, if you have my data operator with the right governance, you can actually use that quite a lot. It's not yet in place, and that's what we're trying to do. We need money for that, and we don't have yet data trust in place. And so that's kind of, we realize we may be late, but I think we have learned a lot in the process. We could actually come with, even for the vaccine, we start to discuss with pharma, with some of the people in the group to say, well, isn't that the type of system you would need to actually do post-marketing surveillance of your vaccine? So that's really in a nutshell. I hope I answered the question here. And I don't know how that could actually work with what you are doing in Brazil and how we could actually contribute and work together there.
Well, it's beautiful. It's very useful. I don't think we are quite there yet in terms of defining all the roles and various sources. We are still at a very high level talking about the principles. But one perspective that I get from you is that you are planning to have this basically imposed or licensed through the state. So it's something different from a bottom-up initiative that is completely detached from what the state is. For example, the state here has a contact tracing app that is installed in all phones in Brazil that are using Apple or Google. But people could use other contact tracing systems in their applications and send this data not necessarily to government authority, but to some reliable third party that allows them to put together all these different sources of data in a trustworthy manner. And yeah, we are very much aligned in this idea. I think that it should not be only from the state. I think that it could be that communities, the different communities have different levels of tolerance to risk. So it might be that some people in a particular area of the country want to have a stricter control and prefer this kind of non-state approach, and others that couldn't care less and they just adopt the state approach as a minimum. So I think also we need to think about how these two things can coexist, what incentives we give to people to share and enter in as part of this ecosystem, and most importantly, what are the guarantees that these operators are ensuring that the data is reliable. For example, data about self-assessment, it can be, it can be not authentic data, and so this might undermine the quality of the assessments. So all these are questions. I don't think we are as concrete and far down the road as you are, but I think we are aligned in the feeling.
And very happy to provide you, to give you access to more material if you want to.
Niccolo, what I'm hearing you say or ask for is a role for my data as an alternative to government in making some of the decisions, whether the decisions are related to technology or data protection or both. Is that a fair characterization, summary of what you said? And if it is, can you, based on your experience doing this in Brazil, do you have a dream or an idea of how my data would have, what would we have to do in my data in order to have that impact where government might be willing to give up some authority? Again, whether it's over the App Store or the policies or the, whatever governance to another entity, whether that entity is your entity, whoever is sort of paying your salary, or whether that entity is my data. So in other words, I'd like to use your experience in this context to dig into this next level based on your particular situation.
Okay. Yeah, it's more or less what you're saying. I don't think that we should have it as an opposite approach to the state. I think it should complement what the state does. In many respects, here in Latin America, at least, the states have been very minimally intervening into the economy, and they have been trying to take measures for the pandemics, but there is also a lot of pressure from corporates and many economic players that want things to continue to go the way they should, they want. And the problem is that many people don't agree with this approach by the government. So I suggest that there should be a possibility to opt into some plus standards, which is not the minimum standard of data protection, but some principles that enable both data protection and also data sharing. I don't know how to get there exactly. I think we are trying to advance that conversation with the My Data Brazil hub. What I can say about Brazil is that there is a framework that is very much still open, in the sense that there are many gaps, because the new data protection law was passed this year, just a couple of months ago, and the authority needs to detail a lot of aspects. For example, what constitutes anonymization, or how can you rely on a legitimate interest to process personal data, which is a very broad topic. So now the companies are trying to align with the spirit of the law, but I think they are still, with a lot of uncertainty about how the law is going to be applied. And so there is this possibility, I think, this opportunity that is specifically provided in the law that says entities can get together and create codes of conduct, and then these codes of conduct can be approved by the regulators. So what potentially could happen is that within the My Data community, either Latin America, global, or at the local level, we managed to find some principles that suggest what a responsible intermediary of health related information should do, and then consumers would possibly switch to that model, or follow use the services of these entities, and eventually this would be probably approved by the regulator, and there would be a standard that the standard will be successful only once the market starts to take it as a solution. And so I think the first thing is to identify what would be the standards. And this is what we're trying to do tomorrow with this conversation. Then slowly we can suggest to create a code of conduct. And then eventually, hopefully, this will become something that will be recognized by the regulators. But I don't know, this is the vision, the dream. You asked about the dream. I answer with the thing that I can tell you closer to being a dream. But it's not easy.
Thank you. May I ask if there are other people in the group that are not from the My Data Pandemic who have other questions? Otherwise, we would go to the question. We would like to ask you. Okay, getting here. So I think what it would be interesting for us to understand from your point of view, certainly for people who have some background in data science and in statistics. So what do you think went wrong in COVID-19 from a data perspective, and what was good in your experience in your country? Who wants to jump on that? And then the next one would be, what can we learn from that, and what will be the further work? But so can we go on the first question? For the people who are joining the session here, outside of the My Data for Pandemic group.
Sorry, so who's taking the notes for this one?
I'm going to take the note here,
Okay,
yeah. But maybe it would be good if you could do that, so that would be good, so that we can combine. Somebody wants to jump? Iain, may I put you on the spot, because you said you have a background in data science. What do you think went well, or you did statistics, went
Right.
well, or wrong? Yeah.
Right. My impression has been that each government has endorsed different approaches for collecting data, and sometimes they oscillated from one approach to another. It might have been a central solution, which is not what we promote here in My Data, and some were distributed. And the engagement, you need to have enough data to make a difference in how you analyze the data. I haven't worked, disclaimer, I haven't worked directly with the data surrounding COVID, but just seeing from the research that I've read is that there's not enough data around. So I understand it's being collected, and I think it might take some years before we really know from the data that's being collected how best to prevent the spread of the disease. So I think we're a little bit early, but at the same time, I would stress that we need a solution like what My Data is promoting, this My Data operator, in order to, in a future pandemic, be able to have a solution that the individual feels comfortable with sharing the data, because some countries, the adoption have been as low, very low. And others like Iceland, I think I've heard of 40%, maybe South Korea was 60. But you need to get it fairly high to have a significant enough data to make a difference. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. The one thing I believe, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
John, you mentioned iGrant, that you are a fan, and
I collaborate with them directly, so okay. Not only a fan, we work together. Yes.
So where in the picture that we showed earlier would you see iGrant specifically as participating, and how would you be working with My Data in order to put iGrant in that picture?
It's a very good question, and there are really cool demos surrounding what iGrant has done. There was a hackathon that that's how I got introduced to iGrant, and Frederick is aware of it. And there was a hackathon, was it Sweden? Hack the COVID Sweden, where in the demonstration, you're giving people the ability to rate how they feel. So you can collect user-generated self-rating, and that information can be then shared or used as an assessment when you're trying to enter a facility. This is more of subjective. And on the other hand, you could have an actual test. So the latest demo we've done is I go to a test facility, I get a COVID test, and now I have a certificate. And that's a big question right now. I mean, who's being vaccinated, who has already had COVID, they should have more liberties. I mean, this might be controversial, but they should maybe have more liberties than somebody who hasn't had COVID and needs to be more cautious. So you're collecting these verifiable credentials, this self-rating and other input that can help in avoiding the spread and also be informed or get businesses back to working.
Right, but I'm trying to be much more specific in the context of our thematic group. How would we include your work in what we're doing?
Maybe, Adrian, I can answer that because I'm also working with Iain and Frederick, and Iain, correct me if I'm wrong. Our grant would be a My Data operator.
Right.
On top of that, they have an application called Data for Life, which is a self-assessment solution that you would actually connect. What they don't have is the data commons because of issue related to data security to store a lot of data. So they would be a data operator. Am I correct, Frederick?
Yes, that's yeah.
And they're actually people with whom we can actually start to implement like other My Data operator which are in operation. Okay.
Well, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but that's still not an answer to my specific question as to, you know, what would happen tomorrow in order for you to be participating in the demonstration or in the stuff that we're doing?
I think we've done several demonstrations surrounding COVID, from the COVID in Sweden, and then our latest demonstration with the COVID test. So the question is, how do we connect the semantics you want to capture to be able to demonstrate the entry points where you're actually capturing, because I guess through the semantics, you're actually capturing some form which you want to put in a verifiable credential. So we just need to create the storyboard of, I'm collecting this information using this semantic information. Maybe I misunderstand what you mean by semantic.
I didn't use semantic. All I said was, we don't have a demonstration of what we're proposing today. And we're trying to figure out who would fund having such a demonstration or something else like it. And I'm just curious if what we have is a lack of funding or a lack of structure or a lack of governance.
Oh, we could have a future meeting and then together with iGrant to do a demonstration of what we've done to see if it matches what you would like to demonstrate of what you have in mind. Because the diagram that was shown earlier seemed very familiar with what we have done. So we have maybe a close match.
A very good question and suggestion is that indeed our grant is not complete. It does not have the data commons and therefore cannot come with the segmentation. But I think just to give some of the principle, I think maybe quite interesting.
If you remember right, Lal was involved in the beginning because with Data for Life, it's possible to transfer the data to the data common database. The question to have an integration or an interface to communicate accordingly. Yeah, once that interface is up, it's easy to transfer the data at the end.
I think one of the problems, if we look beyond Sweden and iGrant and so on, is the fact that the national governments of Europe are trying really hard to work together to find common solutions for these things, which makes it go seemingly very slow. But for them, things are happening at lightning speed. So it is. I would say it's as much a matter of governance and the fact that we still have very much nationalized healthcare system. You know, the European Union has nothing to do with healthcare unless it's done on a voluntary basis. So the European governments are learning quite a lot as we go along, but we're coming with a concept which is quite different from what they're used to.
A different approach.
Yeah.
Can I ask also the perspective of Brazil on the first question?
All right. Well, just as a disclaimer, I'm a lawyer, so I'm probably talking about different points.
We still love you.
Yeah, nobody's perfect, right? No, here what went wrong, in my view, is that nothing was done. I mean, several things went wrong. We had, again, as I was saying, the government was saying that we should keep everything open, and the problem was that data protection law was not enforced yet, so the data were not used to contain, the population spread, to monitor, the risks, and all this was changed throughout the pandemic because the data protection law entered into force. Now, I'm afraid I'm not able to comment on the manifestations that you mentioned, but I'm sure that your initiative could be brought to light, also in Latin America, in Brazil, in these countries that do not have a clear governance strategy yet about COVID. There is no, decree saying what should be done with the data. The only thing that happened during the pandemic was, yes, this law entered into force, but also the government tried to use the data once to understand how people were getting unemployed across the country. And this was like a governmental decree that was brought under constitutional challenge. And the Supreme Court said, government, you cannot take the data from the registration of ID and telephone numbers of everyone who has a telephone here to do these kind of things, because there are no clear limits. So this is the only attempt where data was tried to, where the government tried to leverage the data and create some solution for the pandemic. But as you see, it was not about the risk of health, it was about the employment. So a completely different perspective.
Okay, yeah, so that's, thank you, interesting. Is there anybody else then? I see there's another lady like Carola. Carola, would you mind to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm from Argentina, living in Sweden now. And regarding the pandemics in Argentina, the government obliged us to use an app that had a lot of leaks. Myself, I didn't apply on I didn't download the app. But when I have to leave the country, I have to comply all my data. And clearly, I don't know what they do with that. I'm kind of afraid of the usage they could do, because we are kind of in a government that it's on the border or not being so democratic. We were 8 months in lockdowns, so that's something, the only thing I can say about Argentina and my experience.
And when you say giving all your data, you mean data because you did not collect contact tracing, right?
Yes, first you have to install that in your phone, so they ask for your email. And also they oblige you, in order, if you want to go out on the street, to complete every 24 or 48 hours your health state. That is, if you have fever or not, or you have different symptoms. And if you don't do that, the app goes in red, so the police can stop you and, well, they would send you to jail. There were a lot of, you go to the police station and then you go out, but there are a lot of causes that they were initiated because not complying with the law of the lockdown.
Oh my
And
God.
now,
So,
yeah.
so now you're living in Sweden. So can you compare the two lockdowns?
Yes, I mean, I don't feel we are in a lockdown here. I feel, I mean, there is no COVID. That's my feeling, and so when I go to a supermarket, I try to remember that COVID is still around. But in Argentina, they try to see the fear of the population. The message from the government was, you go out, you die. You complain in the street because there are loss of jobs and the economy is going down, you die. So that was the message till now, because they couldn't hold the situation and they opened everything. And now we are the 5th country with more deaths. So that's...
But exactly related to that, obviously, I think in Sweden it's much better, but if you look at the US, it's all freedom. Well, in Argentina, with your application, you were kind of obliged to actually do that every 12, but that may help the country to be safer. So yes, it's the fact that you were enforced to do it, and if you did not do it, you would go to jail, or the fact that you had to do it, because at some point in time, your freedom to do whatever you want may create a risk for the other one if you are contagious. So
yes,
what is fundamentally the problem is the enforcement or the fact you had to do it? Because I would say if you bring the other people safe, then it may be a positive part too.
Yes, I don't feel, for example, because the way I think to feel safe or to be safe is to get conscious to the people. And for example, we did tests. So there were no access for months. There were no access to really having COVID tests. So we didn't know how many people were ill. Or, well, our government tends to lie about statistics all the time. I mean, in the past year, they destroyed the agency that did statistics. We have inflation, yes. There were 4-year period that this department was running again, but the color of the politics changed, and we are heading to lying about statistics. It's mad, but it's our reality. So I think there were a lot of conscience about people about what doing, but they were forcing, for example, lockdowns in cities where there were no ill people. So there was pointless to do all this lockdown. I don't know, and all the measures didn't prevent us to being free. I mean, they free the country when we were having like 2,300 contagious per day, and maybe a thousand there. And in that moment, they opened the country when they were out of their hands.
So Sweden made some huge mistakes there as well. We opened up the access to the elderly people's in elderly homes, for example, right when the second wave hit. So it's very difficult to govern or guide, or
The question is that based on that, is a my data approach where the citizen, even in a government like Argentina, which is quite autocratic, if you have independent organizations that are managing your data, obviously they should not come into the power of the authorities. But would that be an approach that would be sustainable and feasible in countries which is more autocratic?
I think if it's not dependent on the government of the moment, I think it would be useful. I believe that data would have saved a lot of lives. I was myself in a project that tried to help the doctors to get to the diseased people better communication and assistance. Well, it didn't succeed because we couldn't get the proper interest. But I think if the government, I mean, if there is an international organization out of any leads with the government, I think it might be interesting. What I feel it's more relevant is that as the worldwide, we don't have a database how to treat the diseased people. Or at least we didn't have at the beginning, or the doctors in Argentina, they know how to treat because they talk to a friend or they Zoom it, but there was not a centralized information.
Yeah, thank you. That would be indeed useful. Okay, I see the time is passing. No, can I thank you very much, Carola? I think that was quite informative. No, Julia and Vero and Sami, do anything from your perspective, please?
I'm actually originally from Argentina too, although I lived in 2008, and so I not following all the news. Of course, I have a lot of friends and family, so from time to time, yes, I know certain things. And while I was listening to this, the comments about the software, the application in Argentina, I didn't know it was mandatory, the application. Now I'm checking the government page. They say that it's in a new update. The code allows reverse engineering, something that is actually quite good and can be audited. So I don't know if it is really, if it is like that. I didn't do any audit, but I mean, I think this is actually something that should be mandatory for any, like if the government is telling the people, any government is telling the people to install certain software, we have to work with open software, like and software that can be audited. Actually, what I can say is from Norway, that I know that there was a huge investment in money in the software, and but some months later, so I'm not quite sure how long it took it, but this finally this project was stopped. First, so for me it was a bit shameful that there was a lot of money used by with our taxes, and for something that at the end it was audited by the security office in Norway, and they say this is too invasive to our privacy, and it doesn't justify for the small amount of cases that are in Norway. So the project was stopped. And I think the number of people who install this software, the application was 600,000 with a population of 4.5 million. I didn't install the application. I didn't trust. And one of the things that I didn't trust is because it was centralized. I think this should be done in a decentralized way. Like I think in Switzerland, I don't know the details exactly, but I think it's they wait more for the application like other countries in Europe, and they started using the offer made by Apple and Google that was allow for a more decentralized use of the data. So that's all what I know.
Any? Well, I think we in terms of wrong and good, maybe what we can actually, I think we start to have some additional idea, and thank you for that. But I think it's what we mentioned is the lack of harmonization in terms of approach, the lack of clear governance, and also lack of understanding and protection from a data privacy. I think that comes quite a lot. And the fact that centralization is not a good idea. Okay, I think that's kind of what we've seen as well. We can see quite a lot. Can I ask maybe, well, Serge, from if you took note, any key highlight that from your point of view?
So I just took a few notes in the breakout session one, if you look, search for it later. I would say, okay, the key things here, I guess, is the adoption. Well, adoption, I guess, of the app, and so privacy was mentioned, and I guess, yeah, maybe that is the main reason. I don't know, maybe even literacy and something like that, but that wasn't mentioned, I guess. But this crowd here, this conference is quite biased. It would be hard to find an data illiterate person, right? So you won't get that kind of.
But I think one of the point we just, because I think indeed it was interesting to hear everybody talking about an app. The old principle we wanted to push forward is to say it's just not about one app, because there is no single app that would be good enough, but is to bring together many different kind of inputs, be it from the lab, being from an app, being from additional self-assessment, so that when you start to bring all that together, you triangulate. But from a data privacy perspective, it does not help. On the contrary, because if you start to triangulate data, then you get even more insight of a person. And so that's key, being having the core of everything is fair of misuse of data and data privacy in using any app. Can I ask maybe going through the people here, maybe Sally and Julie, Sammy, sorry, and Julie, you did not say anything from your side before we go to what we think we could do better for next time? Julie?
Yes, sorry, this is Sami. Well, I wasn't available here for full time. I had to go for a while. But well, I'm from Finland, and it's interesting to hear these different stories from Argentina and other countries, because Finland has been one of the most, probably one of the best countries handling COVID in many ways, and also in this COVID tracking application. It's something like over almost, or something like Finland, there's 5,500,000 people, so 5.5 million people in Finland, and over 2 million, maybe 3 million have downloaded the application. And it's really heavily used here. And I'm actually involved in a research project, and we are writing articles about this Finnish application and case. And I agree on your interpretation that the adoption is the key issue here. You need to get people adopting the tracking system, and that must be built with some kind of mechanisms and features and communicating stuff that builds trust, that people actually trust it. And for example, luckily Finland turned into decentralized mode. Our application is decentralized, and it uses the Google Apple black box model. And it's quite safe in that way. So people trust it and download it. On the other hand, after the tracker finds something and people go from the tracker software to our National Institute of Healthcare, they give permission to actually give the information to government use, the regular healthcare use. So we have actually a system that is two-sided. The tracking is completely anonymous, so you can't track where people are, who they meet, and so on. But on the other hand, after the diagnosis is done, it's completely centralized and open for government. So,
sorry, Sami, could I ask, and of course, Isabelle, if I can ask a question, if there's time, to Sami. So we also have an app in Slovenia. I have it installed, but I'm at home all the time, so I got no warnings about anything. Pretty boring. But you said you're doing research about it. So do you actually know how reliable this thing is? So how many false alerts and?
Well, we have been asking for that, and actually nobody really knows for sure how these Apple Google black box works, because there's some internal algorithms that try to make threshold suitable, how many they give the alerts and who they don't, because it's based on the distance or the proximity alert of Bluetooth and proximity of the devices. So things like walls between two individuals might change it, the obstacles change it, and so on. And only thing that it measures is the proximity, that how close, how long, and how powerful the connection has been in that. And it doesn't know anything about if people have been, for example, using the mask or anything else. They just measure the proximity of the two devices. And therefore, it's really hard to measure how reliable they are.
Okay, I think I'm going to thank you, Sami. I think I did not realize we were that late. I thought it was much more early. So I think we have to stop here because we were supposed to stop 2 minutes ago. Before we go, I really would like to ask everybody here, maybe just quickly, one word about what they think will require future work. And I'll go by the end. Sami. What do you think would be important to be better and successful in the next pandemic? Quick word.
Well, I think we should probably follow quite closely the procedure that Finland has been doing. We came a little late, but we did it quite well. So decentralized mode with the really heavy marketing and trust building for the population.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
I think there needs to be, in terms of the data, more like a global standard, really. I think part of the problem has been that every country's done things differently, and even within countries, it's all been done differently, and we can't make those kind of global comparisons across things as well. So yeah, I would say something more global.
Thank you. Iain?
I would say for me, it's about enabling the people who are not ill to contribute their data, because that's the 99.9%.
Vero? Vero? Gone or not on mute. Then I have Nicolo.
Yes, I share Ian's sentiment. So we need to make people understand how they can benefit from the insights of sharing knowledge, not only themselves directly, but how communities benefit if they start sharing the data. And so the ones who have not yet caught COVID are a crucial component of the population.
Thank you. Adrian?
I think the next step needs to be figuring out how to have a demo of what we're discussing without having to raise more money first.
I agree. Frederick?
I'm so frustrated. I think taking it from the beginning, in Sweden we had good preparation. We had done all the paperwork, but to go from documents to structured data and make sure it's interoperable. We had a good plan, we had good documents, but no one had done anything to actually implement it in any of the systems, which is maybe good because now we can remake it totally with a human-centric approach instead. I don't know.
Maybe different approach, yeah. Okay, Carola or Carolina? You're mute.
I would say a worldwide data share concept. I'm more concerned on the doctors and the healthcare share experience because probably the next pandemic we were going to face, we will not know what to do like this one. And I think that is the chain of information most valuable.
Thank you. Serge?
I don't know if I have something to add meaningful. So.
Oh, you fine?
I'm fine. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Davide.
Create a trust, as I already mentioned, among the population, because if people don't believe, don't buy in, the data would be whatever. And then, as mentioned by Frederick or Iain, you need to have sort of way to communicate. This means data common, then that you are trying to be tough. Once you have that, at least to find people implementing this stuff for free.
Well, yes, but I think that's where I would agree with Adrian. I think it would be good to have something concrete and a demonstration, even simple, even if it's fake. I think we can fake whatever needs to be faked, but show how it could actually work in reality. So definitively. And so thank you, everybody. Nicolo, if you want to have more input and discussion for Latin America and Brazil, I'm more than happy. We have a lot of material that we would be happy to share if you want to, but obviously we are still also trying to find the best way. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I think it was a small group, but I think it was quite insightful. Thank you for your support and keep in touch.